Yes, so I am delighted to host the big book club read with Ferdia Lennon discussing his debut, Glorious Exploits. Hopefully most of you will have read the book, but if you haven't, a little warning, there will be spoilers. We might well discuss the ending, we're likely to discuss everything. So I'm going to give you a short introduction, give you a little reminder of the book or something, what it's about if you haven't read it, just very briefly. And then I'm going to get us started with the first question. And then I would love you all to join in, because it's a book club. This is a big book club. So there's going to be a couple of roving mics. So you just put your hand up when you have a question for Ferdia or when you have a comment, a thought about the book. It could be about the book, or it could be about Ferdia's process or how he got his book published, anything you like. I have a lot of questions if none are forthcoming, but I'm hoping there will be lots. So, Ferdia is an Irish author with Irish and Libyan heritage. He studied history and classics at University College Dublin, then creative writing at the University of East Anglia. Glorious Exploits is Ferdia's debut novel, and I simply cannot keep up with all the awards and prizes it's won or been shortlisted or longlisted for. It was a Sunday Times bestseller. It won the Waterstones Debut Fiction Prize, the Bollinger Everyman Woodhouse Prize for Comic Fiction, and guess what the prize is for that if you win that? You have a pig named after your book. So there is a pig called Glorious Exploits, which is just perfect. It was shortlisted for the Dylan Thomas Prize and the Nero Books Debut Fiction Prize and more, I think. They just keep coming. So for those who haven't read it, or those who might have read it a long time ago, this is a very brief summary. Set in 412 BC in Sicily, Glorious Exploits follows two unemployed potters, Lampo and Gallon, in the aftermath of the Athenian invasion of Syracuse. As the Athenians lay imprisoned in one of the old quarries in the city, starved and kept in horrific conditions, Gallon and Lampo devise a plan to put on a production of Euripides' Medea and his new play, The Trojan Women, with some of the prisoners as actors. The story follows the friends as they try to organise the resources, casting, funding, venue, costumes, and of course an audience. The plays are put on, but nothing has really changed for the dying Athenians, except that Lampo decides he can save at least one of them, the green-eyed Patches. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but will that do?
Yeah.
Okay. Lampo takes him by wagon to a ship owned by the mysterious Turian. Again, I'm not sure of the pronunciation, and Patches escapes. 10 years later, we meet him again, visiting Euripides and telling him this story and thanking him for saving his life. So it's a tragedy and a comedy. It's perfect. So to kick off with my first question, Ferdia, can you tell us how you came to write this book? Was it the first novel you've written, and what was the inspiration?
So first of all, thank you everyone and the Winchester Book Festival for having me, and for you for also suggesting me. Never been to this city, and it's really beautiful, and very happy and excited to get to do this. Where did the inspiration for the book come from? Always loved the classics. I loved Greek and Roman history, mythology. Ever since I was a child, I studied history and classical studies in university. And I think when I was a teenager, I read Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War, which is about the 27-year war between Athens and Sparta that spills across the Greek world. And at the heart of it, you have this invasion of Sicily. And in many ways, the war, even though it's with Sparta and it's been going on for so long, is actually lost with this foolhardy, hubristic invasion of Sicily. So a significant portion of the Athenian male population die. They lose most of their ships, and afterwards, Athens is never the same. And that remains. Athens is never politically and militarily dominant ever again. It's culturally significant, but the Athenian Empire really ends there. Really wanted to write about it. Didn't know what my angle would be until I picked up Plutarch's Life of Nicias. A great series, Plutarch's Lives, where he's like compares famous Greeks with famous Romans, trying to understand if there's like a moral lesson. And in his Life of Nicias, who was the main Athenian general in the invasion of Sicily, and ironically, he actually was the Athenian general who passionately spoke against the invasion, said, this is a terrible idea, we're at war with Sparta, it will be a lot more difficult to conquer than these other people are saying it will be. But he was ignored. Anyway, he becomes the general, and it all ends disastrously. And the last, kind of the ending of Plutarch's Life of Nicias, he describes how thousands, what remained of the Athenian invasion force, they were imprisoned in these limestone quarries outside of the city of Syracuse and left to die. And basically all of them died, almost all of them died, except for a few who were given food and rations in exchange for lines from Euripides' plays. Because
so that was true?
That was true.
Wow.
So Euripides was the Athenians were hated invaders, would-be conquerors, but there was a deep love and reverence for Athenian drama, especially the work of Euripides. And also, in the Life of Nicias, we learn that although almost no one survived, those very few that did survive, apparently some of them went to Euripides' house and basically told him that his work, his poetry, his drama had been responsible for them being able to escape and live.
Wow.
So there were these two little threads that when I read that suddenly became very clear, this is what I want to write about.
Yeah. And you just started, or, how does that work?
I sat down and I worked away and it was done and it was all very easy.
I don't want to hear that.
No, it took a long time. The book took many years. I spent a lot of time researching it. I went to Sicily, I went to Greece, I visited the quarries of Syracuse, Athens, Delphi, and various different places to get a sense of what the landscape was. It's you know yourself. The writing can be very, very fun and the best thing in the world to do. You're immersed in it, because I think to make a story come alive for the reader, you first need to make it come alive for yourself. So I had a lot of fun writing this book, but there were definitely times where it was tricky.
Great, thank you. So over to the audience. Oh, here's a hand up immediately. Thank you very much.
Hi, I just wanted to ask you, apart from obviously you being Irish yourself, what was the inspiration behind making Lampo have those Irish tones to the point of view?
I thought it would be easy. The real reason was, well, as you said, I'm Irish, so it was a natural way for me to tell the story. So I'm trying to interpret this really distant alien world of 5th century BC Sicily. And in many ways, the default setting would be to have the characters sound like they'd stepped off the cricket pitch at Eton. If you read a story set in ancient Rome or Greece, that is the kind of the tone of the voice. And I think when you do that, people often presume that that's historically accurate, but it's no more accurate than me using a kind of Dublin vernacular. They're both. It's just that the more traditional RP version that we've adopted is the convention. So it seems familiar, so it seems like it's well researched. So by using an Irish voice, you're going to jolt the reader. The reader is going to go, oh, what's this? This is anachronistic. That makes it new, because it distinguishes it from other work set in the period. But hopefully it also makes us question a little bit, go, okay, I presume that these characters are going to sound like this, but why do I presume that? And then there's the other layer. Sicily is an island that had been colonized a few hundred years before the novel is set. So and Athens is the great maritime empire of the period. So you use a Dublin voice. Syracuse was the largest city on the island. I think it's not like saying that Ireland is Syracuse, but you're creating residences and you're giving a sense of where Sicily stands in relation to the rest of the Greek world. It's an insider, but it's an insider-outsider in a similar way to Ireland. Like Hiberno English is English, but there are kind of structures in Hiberno English where you can get a sense of the native Irish language sometimes playing underneath it, which gives it a little bit of that difference. So yeah, lots of different, various reasons for that choice.
I have to say, for me, it really brought it alive. It made those two men so real, which I think if they'd been speaking, as you say, the proper English or even American that we see in films. It wouldn't have had that quality that it really has, that kind of sparkiness. Yeah, it was great.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, and one of the things that was helpful, I was reading Aristophanes' plays. So they're the only comedies that were written by an Athenian in the period, set during that period. And what distinguishes them from the tragedies, which are often about mythic heroes, Achilles, the Trojan War, etc. Like, for example, Euripides, about Medea, or about the Trojan women, the aftermath of the Trojan War. Aristophanes' plays are set in contemporary Athens, and they're often largely involving a cast of ordinary people. And when you read them, they're written in modern translations. They have a lot of slang, they're sweary, they're bawdy, there's lots of innuendo. And it was almost again like another moment of realization. The way that we think about ancient Greece, where everything is very formal and everything is very serious, is only part of the puzzle. There was a real ribald comedic tradition in the Greek world. Aristophanes' The Birds, if you read it, the thing it reminded me almost most of was Monty Python. So that was another, I wasn't going to use that was another reason for the contemporary voice.
Yeah, I can kind of see that, the life of Brian, definitely, yeah. Another question? Lady over here.
There's a million things I would like to ask, but I won't. So I'll just focus on one thing that I found really curious and fascinating, and that's the god in the container on the ship. I suppose all of us probably have our own reaction to that, our own theories about it. I'm just curious what yours are. Like, what were you doing with that? What were you hoping we might experience when we're wondering about what this thing means, what it does?
Thank you very much. I was kind of stuck, and I thought I could change things up a little bit. What was the real... In a way, what it was... So in the ancient Greek worldview, fundamental to that, their explanation of the world was the concept of like divinity, and it was also a pagan religion. So the gods were all around you, often in disguise. In many ways, I have the more standard psychological approach. So the gods don't really appear. So the god on the ship, in one sense, communicates or conveys the idea that this was a world in which the supernatural and divinity was real. And it wasn't just real in the way that you would go to a church and you would pray. It was real in the way that the gods were suspected sometimes to actually directly intervene. So that could be a god on the ship. Or it could just be in a world in which people believe that there are gods that can be on ships or can be all around you. And you've drunk a lot of wine and various things, different things happen. Yeah, so you can take it in different ways. And again, I remember reading, if you read Herodotus and you compare it to Thucydides, they're both ostensibly histories. But in Herodotus, it's almost like a transition from myth to history. So in Herodotus, you will have the gods appear, or you will have divine events happen in the midst of something that's meant to be the historical record. For example, King Midas, who touches things, everything turns into gold. He appears in Herodotus' histories as a historical king. Then we go to Thucydides very soon afterwards, where there's none of that. Everything is just a psychological explanation of human beings doing things. And I suppose the god on the ship is a way to give a sense that there wasn't just a consistent rational explanation for events. They believed that many people believed, probably most of the population, that magic was real and that the gods could appear.
Yeah, just really quickly. I was just really interested that the god on the ship, and thank you for the explanation, but was twinned or appeared on the boat of this character who was quite an unreliable character, or somebody that I found myself being quite suspicious of him after a while, not trusting him as an actor, as it were. I just wondered if you'd intended us to sort of read that into it, that the god in the ship was just another way that he was perhaps pulling the wool over people's eyes.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's interesting that you picked up on that. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to tell, for me, I believe when the book is out there, it's for readers to take what they will from it. And I don't want to directly go, this is exactly what was in the ship, even if I might have my own ideas of what was going on or what Turin was thinking. I will say another inspiration for the character of Turin, he's a figure from Irish mythology, or rather his sons. There's a famous Irish myth called the Sons of Turin, about these brothers who commit this terrible crime, and as recompense they have to travel around, almost like in Pain, a blood feud. They travel around the known world having to collect these different objects, and they are always in disguise, and they go to Sicily, and they go to Persia, and they go to Greece. And there's a few things going on there. It was a story that I think it's a magnificent myth. It was also probably written down around the same time that my novel is set, and it also has clear links with Greek mythology. So a lot of scholars believe that myth was influenced by myths, for example, the Labours of Heracles, etc. But as you say, it's in that story these characters they're basically charlatans. They are not presenting themselves as they are. So, yeah.
I think it's really interesting what you say about people who've read the book asking the author questions. That is what we're here to discuss, but sometimes the author doesn't have the answer. I completely agree that when the book is out there, it becomes a different thing when people read it, because you will have your own pictures in your head, your own biases, your own history. You'll bring all that to every single book you read. So all of you will have read a different book, which I think is also amazing. But it means that sometimes as authors, we just kind of want to bat it back and say, well, whatever you think.
Completely.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And I also think sometimes there's a lot of writing that's very conscious, but a lot of the best writing is somewhat subconscious. You're not always in complete control of what you're doing. And you might think that you're writing something in a certain way for one reason, and actually there's more going on that you're necessarily aware of. And that's the value sometimes of academic scholarship and readers, etc. Is the author isn't necessarily the best person, or doesn't always have the most complete understanding of everything that they were doing.
Yeah, great. Let's go to this gentleman and then that gentleman.
You mentioned you visited the mines at Syracuse. I just wondered how inspirational they were for your descriptions, because they're quite astounding place.
Thank you very much.
And also, you've got modern statues there, which I found quite amazing when we went there.
Yeah. So when I
Did
went,
you incorporate those? Or?
when I went there, they didn't have the statues, so that exhibition wasn't there. It was literally just the quarries, and it definitely had a real. It was quite moving, because I was deep into the research, so I was obviously aware that this was like an open air. I think it's the first recorded concentration camp in history that we have a record of, and thousands of young men and old men went in, and almost nobody left. And then the day that I went there, it's people with ice creams, taking selfies. So it's just that strange sense of history. And it can be, the meaning and significance of a place can change, but also people can be unaware of it. And then just the physical space, what it looks like, the atmosphere, it's a quarry, so I'd imagine some of the structure has changed a little bit, because limestone would have been extracted in the last couple of thousand years, but you can still get a real sense of it. Also very interesting, the proximity to the sea. You could look this up on Google Maps, but it wouldn't be the same. The fact that there was a theatre built really, the ancient Syracusan Greek theatre is really close to the quarry. And that is a very strange juxtaposition. The theatre, place of entertainment, the concentration camp, death camp. And you can look that up in a book, but it isn't the same as walking to it and walking through it. Yeah. So it's it really, it did affect me.
Great, thank you.
Could I just pick up on what you were both saying about writing books and then passing them over to the reader and it's up to us? But surely there must be times when you feel protective and outraged by certain people's misinterpretation of your work.
I don't think I've ever felt outrage. No, not quite outrage. No, I think I genuinely believe that the book is out there. I love the fact that there are, thousands of different interpretations. I've always made art, and I'm very happy for that, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, I find that when the interpretations are very positive, I approve, but when they're... But yeah, of course, the truth of it is, of course, there are certain times where someone will read something and you might disagree with it. But again, that's the part, as you say, that's creating art and putting it out into the world. And sometimes you mightn't even, you as the author mightn't even be fully aware of what you were up to. So yeah, but I agree with you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I've got two short questions. The first is the title. Can you remind me why the title?
Yeah, so that came from Plutarch's Life of Alexander, where he talks about the idea that often when we're trying to understand a character, we go to their most glorious exploits, whereas in fact, in the quieter moments, we can sometimes gain a greater understanding into someone's true character. I just love the phrase glorious exploits. In addition to that, I was thinking, typically if we write something set in ancient Greece, it will be a mythological retelling, a famous myth, or it will be about a famous figure from history. So it will be about Pericles or Alexander the Great, etc. I wanted to take it from the perspective of the unknowns of history. So a character that would normally just be in the absolute background. And in my mind thinking, okay, well maybe we can understand a period not by focusing on the most famous actors, but someone who typically would just be, disappeared into the background. Yeah, so I felt it fit, and I also just like the rhythm of that as a phrase. Yeah, and you can take it a few different ways.
Great title, I think.
And the second is, what was the most difficult part of the book for you to write, and why?
What was the most difficult? That's a good question. I think, in a way, at a certain section, the beginning was difficult. The beginning was easy, but then you're trying to find a way. I had initially written over 100 pages from the Athenians' perspective. I didn't fully know what the book was going to be. I knew they were going to be putting on plays, but the intricacies of that and how that would unfold in a quarry and the practicalities, I hadn't really worked out. I have a background in classics, but still, I hadn't gone to Syracuse. I hadn't read all of the various primary sources and secondary sources that I needed. So there was an initial beginning full of lots of enthusiasm. Oh, this is great. And then there was like a slow, at the 20,000 word mark, we're going to need a bigger boat. And I took large kind of breaks and had to figure things out. But when I figured those out, and when I made certain decisions and I'd done the research and I'd visited the place or the various places, it became much easier. Not to say easy, but smoother, certainly.
Thank you. Someone else? The lady over here?
Going back to Tyrian, is that, yeah, and towards the end, when he goes on, when they take the Athenians to the boat, and he is singing briefly, and he's offered to go and travel. Did you? In my mind, I thought Tyrian sort of knew, maybe had seen in the pub earlier, Lampo liking, is it Lara? And I just wondered if that was your intention, or did I just read into that? Because I didn't trust him, and I thought he saw, he seemed all-seeing. He saw a lot of things, so I thought he would have picked up on the relationship. I don't know.
Yeah, in the way that in my mind, he would have known, yeah. But it's kind of playing a game. If Lampo agreed to go on the boat, he'd take him on the boat, and he's a guy who almost, flicks coins in the air and lets the fates decide. But yeah, he's a very perceptive, knowledgeable individual. So yeah, I would imagine that he would have known the relationship.
There's a lady behind you, and then the lady in the blue and white.
Can I just pick up on what that lady said, actually? Because I agree. I thought that the boat owner, Tyrian, he knew about Lyra, and I think Lyra was on the boat. This is my reading into your book. And I think he bought Lyra, and I think that was Lampo's choice. Is he going to go and be adventurous, or is he going to go back to how he was, which was quite a flawed character, which is what made him so attractive? So I don't know. That's how I read it. So I'm reading your book, putting those words into your mouth, really, all those ideas. But I don't. Is that what the under story was? The sub story?
Yeah. Well, I think. Yeah, he would have. He would have. Been, she would have been on the boat, and he would have. Turin would have bought her. But in terms of why Lampo doesn't go on, you have to remember Lampo doesn't know that she's on the boat, so he thinks that she's back in Dismas's, and so he wants to go back and buy her freedom. So he's unaware of that. So it isn't as simple as choose adventure. There's a few things going on.
Also wanting to ask about the character of Lyra, and I think one of the things that you explore really beautifully is the characters who are on the fringe as either the vulnerable, if you like, almost like migrants when they're dashing out of the quarry at the end, and Gelon's wife, who has the breakdown after the death of his son, but with Lyra, somebody who's effectively been trafficked. And I wasn't very sure at the beginning how much she was sure about going out with Lampo. She didn't have any choice in the matter. Was there any kind of real relationship, or was it actually just that he was a much better option than anything else that she had, and she grew gradually fonder of him as she could relive some of the stories of her past, which must be so important when you're displaced like that. And I just wondered, really, in the end, we don't see anything more of her after she disappears off on Turin's ship, trafficked again. Did you think that she was quite hard-bitten, quite mercenary? Did you think that she was actually somebody who was in a desperate situation and had to close off feelings because she had no control over her situation anyway?
Yeah. So I don't want to. That's a good question. This is kind of in the similar one with the God on the boat, insofar as I don't want to directly state for the reader, because I feel that's open to interpretation, and it's one of, hopefully, the strengths of that relationship is the ambiguity, in that she is a slave, and her ability to consent or to be completely forthright about her own feelings obviously would have been closed off, because that's just part of I would imagine, the conditions of slavery. And so we don't really necessarily know how she feels. And Lampo, one of the painful things for him is he can love her, but does he know? He is still unsure about how she feels about him. So yeah, I think that's a fair interpretation. We don't know. Could she have, as you said, fallen in love with him and developed real feelings for him? Or was it, this is the best way for me to become free? Obviously, I have my ideas, but I do think it's certainly open to interpretation, and it's part of the experience of the book. And I think it was something that I wanted to... This was a world in which probably half the population were enslaved. You know, in the same Athens, the great democratic city-state, but only the men could vote, and half of the rest of the population were also enslaved. So I think when you're dealing with that world, if you're going to write a work of historical fiction, you have to engage with the historical realities of that period. And slavery was almost taken as a given. So Aristotle, one of the great minds of the period, incredibly intelligent individual, wrote whole books on ethics. He has a piece where he essentially proves that slavery proves to himself or by his own standards that slavery is something that should never be questioned. It's part of the natural order. So this is a world in which people, even the brightest and the best and the people often perceived as most progressive, couldn't even conceive of a world without slavery. So an individual like Lampo is not necessarily going to... He never questions whether slavery should exist. He just wants to free Lyra because he's in love with her.
Yes. Oh, I think there's...
I've always thought that all literature has a greater or lesser amount of autobiography. Do you agree? And if you do, which character do you relate to most closely?
I've always saw a lot of myself in Biton. Sorry. Who... I think what you said is true. I think you take, I think not in a direct, sometimes work is purely autofictional, like Joyce. Stephen Dedalus is basically Joyce, and he was open about that, and there's loads of examples of that. But even if you're doing something like this, Glorious Exploits set in the ancient past, it's less that I am one particular character, but I've certainly used, the emotional experiences that you have form the background or the building blocks in how you make something seem real, and just how you understand the world. So it's less of a one character as me, but there's certainly characters that you use your lived experience to build those characters. And you need to, so it's less, for example, that, I'm repeating myself, but that Lampo is me, but I needed to be able to understand Lampo very, very well. It got to the point when I was writing that book, especially, where I just understood the way that he would think. And that wasn't necessarily the way that I thought about things, but I wasn't stopping, almost like method acting. I wasn't stopping and going, what would Lampo do in this situation? Would he do this? Pen, paper? If the writing is going well, hopefully by that stage you've done enough of the work and the thinking. So a lot of it, again, is thoughts that you're working on a book sometimes, even when you're doing other things, so that you just know and you kind of sense it. That's not to say that sometimes you do have to stop and think and take out the pen and paper, but
you do come to inhabit them, don't you?
Exactly.
And sometimes I find that you know a character so well, and you have your plot point that you have to move them towards, and they will not do it because they're that character and they become alive in that way. I don't know if it's like that for you.
Yeah, completely. And I think that's ideally people sometimes talk about plot and character. And ideally, they'll be indistinguishable because plot will spring from character. Mm. And if you are trying to press a character into a plot map and it's not working, that's usually because there's too much of a discrepancy there. They wouldn't behave.
Yeah.
You're realizing that they wouldn't credibly behave that way. And I think we've all had that experience watching films or TV shows or reading books where you just don't believe the writer has lost the psychological thread of the character. And it's a big issue because we don't believe in it anymore then.
Great, thank you.
Just very quickly, sorry, you tied up lots of loose ends, but with Lara, you didn't give us her history. Was she too peripheral to to give us any sort of what happened to her, or do you just...
It wasn't too peripheral. I think she's one of the main characters. It was more, I like a story sometimes that has that uncertainty. I think there's a way that you can approach an ending. And one way is that you leave, and it's a balancing act. It's like, do I tell the reader everything so that they know what happened with this character and this character and that character? Do I tell them nothing? That's going to be unsatisfying. And for me, and of course it will be up to the readers individually, for me, I often like it where it's a blend of both. Some things are known and communicated, and some things are just left unknown, because that is the way. Sometimes the most important questions about really important people to us, we don't actually know. So I think leaving that uncertainty in a book or in a narrative can actually be really important.
Also, I feel that if we'd somehow learnt more about Lyra, it would have had to be Lyra telling Lampo, and then there would be this whole clunky exchange about, well, this is my history, and this is what I like, and this is the kind of person I am. It's Lampo's point of view. He would never really learn that from her.
Yeah.
So I think, for me, it works not knowing everything.
Completely. And maybe he would have if they'd stayed, if she'd stayed and he'd gotten to go back to her. Maybe that intimacy and that trust would have flourished. But that wasn't what happened.
There's a lady over here.
I found the relationship between two men was sort of prevailed throughout the whole novel right to the end. Very interesting. It kept your interest. But I wanted to ask you, were you always going to tell the story from Lampo's point of view? Or did you ever consider the story being told by Gedon?
Yeah, I didn't. That's a good question. Yeah, because who you tell the story's perspective, you could do it in a third person, but then it would be whose point, even as a third person, who are we mostly following? Or in my case, it's first person, Lampo's narration. But why not do it from Gelon's perspective? And part of the reason why I didn't is almost in the question of wondering why. Because I think very often, if you were to tell this story, Gelon is the leading man. He's tall, he's handsome, he's charismatic. He's the person who has a deep reverence for literature and poetry. He's the person who makes the decisions. He's the person who wants to put on the play. And Lampo was almost along for the ride. And I think, in a way, that was just it was the more unusual way to tell the story. It also created a disconnect between what was happening, which is actually quite tragic, and the way that it was narrated. So if Gelon was narrating this story, it would just be it would be a tragic situation narrated by someone in the depths of grief. That would be like a straight line towards the material. Whereas with Lampo, who's this happy-go-lucky chancer, who genuinely is initially kind of seeing quite awful things, but describing it in this jovial, exuberant way, it creates a discordance, which I found interesting, but also was true for him. I wasn't. If there's comedy in this story, I wasn't writing it like jokes. It's just that is who he is. And I think I'm trying to think of examples of this. If you think of The Great Gatsby, that story, probably the obvious way to tell The Great Gatsby would be from, "Hello, my name's Gatsby," and or telling. Sometimes there's actually a value in telling a story from an oblique angle, from somebody who doesn't know everything, yeah.
There's a lady down here.
I love this book. I really loved it.
I love this question.
So thank you so much. I read it and I also listened to the Audible book. which you narrated. And that's quite unusual. Quite often, authors decide not to narrate the Audible book. And I just wondered why you decided to do that and how you found it.
Thank you very much. Delighted to hear that. Why did I choose? Part of it was I enjoy audiobooks. I know some authors don't. I actually do listen to audiobooks regularly. It started off whereas I had a long commute and it was during rush hour and it was so busy that I wouldn't be able to read a book. So I started to listen to audiobooks and realized, oh, this is actually a very nice way to experience a book. And if an author can read the book well, it can bring something extra to it. It works particularly well for nonfiction, if it's someone's autobiography and they're telling you in their own words. But also some authors of fiction I noticed did it very well. And I had it in my mind that I might like to try, but only if I could do it justice. And they made me audition, actually.
Really?
And I got the role, so...
Well, I was never even asked.
I put myself forward, though.
Oh, did you?
And then they were like, well, no, we have to... But, yeah.
Good question, thank you.
Hi. I'm really interested in the fact that we've had a wonderful renaissance of retellings of mythology, classical literature in recent times, often from a female perspective. But I was wondering what you thought that said about our time, and if that was something that you were thinking and thinking about when you were writing Glorious Exploits, whether you were thinking about the modern eye looking back.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think it was. Why do I think this is happening now? I think part of it is just momentum. So we had Pat Barker's, brilliant novel, and then we also had Madeline Miller. And I think when you have really great examples of something and they have success, that just builds momentum. Other writers go, actually, that idea that I had, yeah, I should pursue that. Publishers are more willing to get behind it, and then you have more books into that space. I also just think that these stories, these myths, are very, very rich, and so they lend themselves to be reinterpreted. For example, even Euripides' play in the book, The Trojan Women, that is Euripides taking a very famous military war epic, the Iliad, and going, I'm going to take that and I'm going to flip it on the other side and I'm going to write a great anti-war drama from the most famous war epic ever. So I think with these, like the feminist retellings like Circe or the Silence of the Girls, that makes sense. It's in the same tradition. And I think you're able to do that because the original texts themselves are rich enough to hint at different interpretations. And for me, it was almost serendipitous. I always knew I wanted to write something in this period, and I actually felt like, in many ways, it was uncommercial, but I just really wanted to do it. And there aren't many. It's surprising. The vast majority of Greek stories are retellings of myths. There are relatively few books set in the period. So I suppose in a way it's a good example as actually for writers out there. I think you're, rather than following the market, sometimes just follow what you are excited about and you'll have a better chance of of pulling it off. Because, yeah. But yeah, really good question.
Any more? Oh.
Yes, that was my question. Rumour has it that you're working on your next book, and I was wondering if it's also set in ancient times or have you moved on?
Lampo's back. I have started another novel. It's not set in ancient Greece. It's actually set in the 14th century. It's very different, I would say. It's quite different tonally. It's a larger novel, but still historical, and I would imagine you would have a sense that it's the same author. Would I write something set in ancient Greece? I think I would. I had a few ideas. I have a few ideas in the Greek world that I'd like to do at some point. But for now, it's to medieval France. Thank you.
And I understand Glorious Exploits has been optioned for film, which is exciting. I know that, you know, that's no guarantee that it will be made, but, you know, that's exciting. Can you tell us any more, or it's still very early?
It's still really early, and I've been asked not to give too much about it, but it's amazing. I mean, I love cinema, and the person who's involved is someone, actually, ironically, who I was very, whose work I loved growing up. So it was an amazing experience to have them read the book and be engaged with it. So hopefully, we'll see Lampo and Gellon on the screen.
That would be great. It would be, I'm looking forward to that. We probably have time for a couple of more questions.
Well, I'm intrigued to find out, when you went to the quarries, and of course there was an escape out of the quarries and they went down on the path down to where the boat was. Did you do that journey?
I did. Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I didn't do the journey to Hakaira, or the spot that would have been Hakaira. I would have liked to have done it. I was almost as well. I was quite broke at the time that I was writing the book, so I actually even went to Sicily and Syracuse in winter because it was just cheaper. And it would have been, so I did part of it, but I didn't go to the whole. That was an imaginative, I did a lot more kind of looking at maps and atlases and photographs and illustrations to get a sense of that.
I'd like to ask, which I'm surprised nobody has, the ending. The fact that we jump forward 10 years, is it, I think?
Yeah.
Yes, when Patches goes to see Euripides, and how you made that choice. Did that come naturally? Was it something you considered? What did your editor think about that?
That was always my idea. I always knew that it was going to end in that way. That I always had my beginning and I always had my ending. I knew I wanted to. So essentially, Euripides left. Also, it's the inspiration was the quote from Plutarch, where we learn that Athenian prisoners survived by quoting lines from Euripides' plays, and some of those actually went back to Euripides years later to tell him about this. So I knew I wanted to. I just thought that was a very powerful scene, idea, and I knew I wanted to have it in some way. Interestingly, Euripides ended up leaving Athens for the kingdom of Macedonia. I believe maybe he was invited by Alexander the Great's grandfather or great-grandfather, and he was really angry because he'd come last again in the dramatic festival of Dionysia, so he kept losing often to Sophocles. So even though he's this, for example, Medea, his most famous play, came last, and the play that came first we don't actually know. So he felt quite hard done by.
So that's why he left.
He left. He was like, all right, I'm going to go where I'm appreciated.
I think the ending, it really worked for me, but, you know, it's just quite interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Creative process, yeah. One more. Or not? We can end. Sean, ask our last question.
If nobody else has got one, this is a very shallow question. So, as it's been optioned for a film, who's going to play you in the movie? Who's going to play Lampo in the movie?
Who play? I see, because it's only just so with the option, it's the early stages. Who would I don't know who I'd like. People, I never wrote it. Like, I'm not someone who sits down and writes a book and goes, I think this is going to be, you know. I was thinking maybe The Rock for Lampo. I think he has the reign. People have said that they saw Barry Keoghan as Lampo and Paul Mescal as Gellon. I've heard that a few times. Yeah. But, you know, there's lots of good Irish actors. So, yeah. They're amazing, obviously. But that would be incredible. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
Well, we very much look forward to you coming back and talking to us about your next novel.
Oh, thank
you. I would really like to thank Claire very much for recommending to Sophie and myself that we invited you to come here. And we're very pleased that you said yes. I think that might have quite a lot to do with the fact that Claire asked. But we're really pleased to invite all of you here from the book club. I hope you've really enjoyed it. I absolutely loved the book. I thought it was amazing, as did everybody here. If anybody hasn't bought the book, or if you'd like the book signed, then Waterstones are outside and we'll be selling the book and also Claire's books. And I think both Ferdia and Claire would be very happy to sign your books and also answer any questions that you might have. This is the last of the Winchester Books Festival weekend events. We've had over 30 over the weekend. I think that anybody that has been there and been to any of our events over the weekend will know that it has been exactly what Sophie and I wanted it to be, which is very well-rounded, huge spectrum, everybody from William Hanson to Ferdia Lennon to Hannah Bourne-Taylor talking about the Swifts. We really want that to be what we bring to Winchester so that we can have amazing, different, interesting events and conversations. And really, the other thing that we're really happy about is that so many men have shown up to this event because anecdotally, I would say at least 80% of our tickets are bought by women. And we really want to get more men involved in the conversations and hearing conversations like this and coming along to our events. So if any of you would like to tell us what you'd like to hear at the festival, then please do email us. You can get to us through the website. And also please do sign up for our newsletter, which is on the website, because if we can bring somebody like Ferdia to Winchester, then Sophie and I will make every effort to open up conversations and to host people that we think that you'll all be interested in hearing. Quick little plug, on the 7th of May, we've got Ben McIntyre coming along to talk, and we'd love lots of you to come there. We've already sold a lot of tickets to it, as you can imagine, but we'd really like lots of people to come on the 7th of May. And on that note, that's a wrap for our festival. And thank you so much, both of you, for coming and being a really special way to finish it. So thank you so much.